Good morning.
And then here we go.
Who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks? Hi, I'm Gail Rubenstein, the founder and CEO of a company called Retail Resilient, social selling for the car industry. And we help auto dealers, auto agencies, and vendors in the auto industry sell more cars, service more cars, and make more money using our social selling strategy. That includes TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and anything else you can think of. So if you're looking to invest thousands and make millions, we're definitely the social selling company for you. Like I said, who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks?
If you run a service drive, you know these days first impressions matter. But when your advisors are tied up with inbound phone calls, they tend to neglect their other, more important duties. And did you know 75% of all service calls are frequently asked questions and routine requests? Still, the average dealer misses up to 30% of inbound calls, adding up to a ton of missed service opportunity and increased customer churn. 68% of callers actually go elsewhere if they can't get through, which means you could be losing $60,000 to $70,000 every month in service revenue simply from missing calls. So who will pick up? Introducing Brooke.
Hi there.
Your best service scheduling assistant. Brooke is the first intelligent digital voice assistant to answer, handle, and appoint all of your inbound service calls. Hiring Brooke means absolutely no call goes unanswered, boosting your customer satisfaction and reducing your overhead costs. And talking to Brooke is like talking to a friend with human-level understanding and a friendly conversational voice. Her conversational intelligence is built on millions of actual service industry conversations, making her the easiest onboard you'll ever have. She can handle any volume of calls and follows your policies every step of the way, 24/7. That means even when the lights are off, Brooke is always on.
And I can do it without missing a beat.
You really do check all the boxes. Book with Brooke today. Visit Brooke.ai or call 866-942-1236. Finally, the perfect match.
Recently, we were concerned about our recon time and decided to look into reconditioning workflow software. After doing our research, I can confidently say we finally found the software that was right for us. We love that it packs robust data, control precision, clear communications, and performance accountability, all on my desktop or mobile, so I'm always in touch. Before this, we manually tracked our recon process. We just assumed we were doing okay. We were wrong. After someone in my 20 group told me he used the software to improve his recon time to sale to just 3 to 5 days, I just had to look into it. Their team of recon experts all have hands-on dealership experience. We all benefit from faster time to line, inventory turns, and competitive advantages. To learn more, visit rapidrecon.com.
Special thanks to our sponsors. I'm going to go up with the slide deck. Go ahead, Jeff.
Good morning. Thanks everybody for joining us. And of course, as we, in the podcast world, it's good whenever and good day. And thank you for joining us here at the AutoHub show. And we appreciate everybody tuning in and learning some information. And today, of course, our show is about the Getting to the Top in Auto Masterclass for Women. And Ian has some book recommendations.
There's many books, so it's really hard to choose three. What Will It Take to Make a Woman President was one of them. I Am Malala and Maya Angelou, Letter to My Daughter. So 3 great books. There's many, but those are 3 that I thought were interesting. Go ahead, Jeff.
And of course, our disclaimer is the opinions shared today by our guests aren't necessarily those of the AutoHub show or Ian Nethercott or Jeff Polo, and they don't reflect necessarily our position on any topic.
And we're going to go ahead into Masterclass for Women in Automotive. Special sorry from Gail. She caught the flu. I'm not sure what type of flu is, so she couldn't be on today. So sorry about that, but we're definitely going to have an interesting conversation either way. So go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, well, thank you. Gail, feel better. And unfortunately, we live in a world now that anytime somebody has something, it's a flu, and everybody starts thinking it's something else. And, thank whatever that we're getting to that point that hopefully things aren't such a terrible thing. Joining us today, we have Monica Aurora Beer. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Monica.
Yeah,
who is the founder of Digital Monk Marketing, and I call her a marketing guru, from Calgary, Alberta. And she's actually a generally in the marketing business, but has automotive clients, which will certainly help those that are of interest. And it's nice to have an opinion of somebody who has experience outside of the automotive business. Monica, could you take a moment and introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, you did a great job there. Thank you. I'm Monica Rohraber. I am the founder and CEO of Digital Monk Marketing. We started our business 12 years ago, specifically in automotive. So we work with a lot of automotive clients in the marketing world and trying to find how to transition from a lot of traditional media into the digital world. 12 years ago, that's really when Facebook really started to take off with automotive and started supporting this industry in a really strong, profound way. And Digital Monk was there to support those dealers making that transition.
Perfect. Well, one thing as I trolled your website, I see that you're basically an all female company.
Yes.
And yeah, it's it's a very interesting comment too that to make is one of our sponsors is Brook AI, and in their studies they found that the female voice of the bot, I don't know what to call it, Brooke has a greater level of trust from people being a female voice than a male voice, even though it's service. And they're focused on your parts, your service drive, booking appointments, and the fact that traditionally the service department in automotive has always been viewed as, careful here, a male thing, and men are supposed to know more things. There was a higher level of trust in people booking this. And by the way, dealers, you've got to check this thing out, because wow, is it impressive, because you phone up and it answers, hi, I'm Brooke, and say, great, I'd like to book an appointment. And instead of that, okay, what you're trying to tell me is you would like to book a service appointment. It is the closest thing that I've seen to human interaction, period. But it's quite impressive. We did have other guests due to arrive, but it's a funny time right now. It's beginning of spring, and spring has sprung, the grass has risen. Who knows what happens here? But Ian, first question for Monica, please.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, pardon me, Ian, I do have to acknowledge Elizabeth Hecker's joined us today as an audience member, and Elizabeth, maybe we could call in to answer the odd question, but if not, that's okay. We respect that.
Absolutely. And we are. Oh, go ahead.
I'll take the odd question.
Oh, we're going to give you odd questions then.
And we are live on Facebook and on LinkedIn, so we may get questions from the studio audience there. We may also get questions from other people as they join. Generally, the show in the morning tends to be a slow burn, and probably slower this week just because of NADA last week, so people are still recovering, just so you know. So anyway, you're an accomplished professional in your field. How did you get there, and what hurdles did you experience as a woman, Monica?
Great question. So I sold my first marketing company about 12 years ago, and I went back into radio. I got a job in radio sales through my network, and I thought, you know what, let's try it out. I didn't know what I was going to do at that point, so I took the job in radio, and I had a lot of automotive clients, and so I'd go in there to do their on-air campaigns, and I would start talking about digital because that was where my expertise lied. And so I would help them with their on-air campaign and integrate an online presence as well, like teach them how to use social media, how to use Google, where they should be spending their money on digital, and how that kind of ties back to their traditional marketing strategies that they were implementing. And that's really what they were used to. They were used to the print, they were used to the radio, they were used to the billboards. So digital at that time was still really new. And so as I got to know my clients with their on-air campaigns, integrating it with their digital, I had a few of these dealerships ask me to start helping them with their digital marketing campaigns. And so I only lasted at the radio station for 12 months, and I was consulting again with these dealerships. So I started with about 5 dealerships, really understanding what their unique needs were and how to brand online. And that's really where it started. And then we grew our team out with 11 other of us helping dealerships with their online strategies. So, and I guess coming back to the question is, what was my hurdle? In that particular situation, there wasn't a hurdle. There was no entry. There was no barrier to entry. It was, they know they had a gap and they had found someone to fill that gap. The hurdles started coming in later.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Sorry, you mentioned hurdles coming in later. What hurdles did you come into later?
Well, great question. As you get to know the dealerships, you get to know upper management, what they need. You start noticing that the top is really lonely for women. There's not very many people there. And then you started processing, why is this happening? Women are just as competent in understanding and can take knowledge and execute it. It's not a male or a female thing to understand how a car works or how service works or any of that. It's just studying it, understanding, and executing it. But there was an unsaid rule that you could feel. It was never said that you didn't belong there.
It's quite interesting because I've been in the car business a long time, and as has Ian, and of course, like all men, we think we're pretty advanced in our acceptance of women in the business. And forget acceptance; that's a terrible term, but our acknowledgement that women are a powerhouse, truly, as far as we're concerned. But what do really men in the car business, or what do men in the car business really not understand about women in the automotive business?
That we're just as capable. They see us as, nurturers. And this was a big one, actually. I'll share a story about this. I was with one dealer that me and the team started working with. I was 2 or 3 months pregnant when we first took the client on. And it wasn't until 6 months I was 6 months pregnant until people knew I was pregnant, because I knew, and every other woman in that dealership knew, is the second you were pregnant, there was no more room for you there. So of course that's going to create hurdles for us. Of course that's going to create deceit for us, because we are fighting for a seat at that table, but we're also mothers, and we're also people who are taking care of our families. And we know that there's a perception that we can't do both.
Sure.
And in that situation, I was able to do both. Even though I had my first, my daughter Aria, I still worked the way through. I worked through my pregnancy, and I continued to work. I didn't take a maternity leave. Wow. So that is an option for us women too. Or that it's accepted that, yes, this is the next step, and we can still have women in these positions, and we just make ulterior plans for maternity leave. But it just seems like it's such a big hurdle for men to understand that it's still very possible. It's generally taken as well, now what are we going to do?
Sure. Well, actually, and Ian just posted a question there, but to the other ladies that have joined us in the audience, Elizabeth, as we mentioned, or Jacqueline, please feel free to pipe in and just with your answers to any of these questions, even though they're directed at Monica. We like to share all opinions everywhere.
Yeah, but, we did have that conversation, I think, on technicians, female technicians, Jeff, on a show, I think it was last year, where they were talking about the fact that having a female technician in the service department changed the way all the men behaved, which I thought was really interesting. So anyway, go ahead, Jeff.
but should men actually have to change? I mean, it's very funny. Um, I've worked with a lot of women in the industry, certainly not as many as there should be. But this particular lady that was on this show, Christine Mitchell from the Car Lady, she started as a tech, and she basically, the feeling is she didn't want people. The only change that she wanted was the old boys network of of opinions versus just how they behaved. And Monica, I'll ask you this too: is what is it that you think women expect in the business? Do they want boys to change how boys will be boys, or do they want attitude to change? What difference should there be?
I think both. The excuse "boys will be boys" is not an excuse anymore.
Yeah,
That's such old thinking. We're in 2022. Boys will be boys. Come on, let's grow up.
yeah.
And that comes back to the comments in the boardroom. Coming back to women about their anatomy, about raising children, about not going to take the next step, about not creating opportunities for them to advance. So boys will be boys have created this issue.
Well, one thing that I did notice too, I mean, boys will be boys, a terrible term. I got to admit, boys will be boys is a terrible term, because even when I said that there, I kind of, that's maybe not the description that's right. But when you said things about their anatomy and blah, 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 that's very disturbing, because, people should behave for themselves, how they want to be talked to. But it's very funny how you mentioned the boardroom, because I myself, my whole career, that goes back a little bit, that I always welcomed women in there, and I always had trouble supervising women, and I always welcomed women. I've only had probably 2 supervisors that were women, and I got to tell you, it was always a case of you had to be on top of things to deal with them. And why don't you think women are actually getting more into this business at a faster rate, because there are more?
Sorry, the question.
Sorry, I just realized it. Why don't you think there's more women getting into the car business faster now than they are? And they've increased a little bit, but it's still only single digit percentages.
Yeah, actually, there was a study done by Auto News and Deloitte, and they did a study in 2015, and then the same participants were asked the same questions in 2019, and the results were that women actually believe that there is less room for women to advance in business or in dealerships in automotive than there were in 2015. So it's in women's perception right now, it's actually getting worse. And I think a lot of it is even as a shopper, you go into the dealership, how many women do you see? So if let's say I'm not even an automotive, I'm just shopping for a new vehicle. I'm going into this dealership, I'm seeing maybe 10% of the staff, 20% of the staff is women. What is my perception already? This is a man's world.
Yeah.
From the get-go, right? So the perception is already there that this is where men work. Is it going to become a part of a dream for me to work there? It just seems like there's too many barriers already. Just the perception there is that this is where men work, that this is not a place for women. That's number one.
Yeah, even when you look at the Tesla retail locations and even the new Lucid location here in town, I would say that having visited both somewhat regularly, the vast majority of staff, at least on the sales side, are male. And they're supposedly changing the model. So what does that tell you? I mean, I guess that tells you if you are walking in as a possible customer, a possible employee, you're going to be going, well, like even if I go to Best Buy, I see women working there. Right? So yeah, I guess that's part of it. I mean, we did have, I think, one of our first shows on women in automotive, and not only were the women guests very organized, they were very much working as a team. Not saying that doesn't happen with a panel of male guests, but it's less likely. So, I mean, it's very interesting that I think dealers and maybe even OEMs, they're undervaluing women as a resource, specifically as employees, and they all want more women working for them. So I used that example from the video earlier about the Boston Symphony Orchestra trying to attract women, and the bias of the hiring committee was the reason they weren't attracting them, not the skill level. So I think part of it is, to Jeff's point, it might be harder for that male manager, male GM, or male owner, or even female owner in some cases, but that's a smaller percentage, to manage that female staff member because they demand more. They're just operating at a higher level. I mean, I always used to use the example when I train BDCs, which lion's share of them are women, was basically that the mean average intelligence of women is generally higher than men. And that was a shocker to most of the women I trained, but more importantly, what was a shocker to the dealers, even though I was setting up BDC departments and fixing them, there was very few men doing that job because they just couldn't handle it. It wasn't that they weren't able to, it was just when you compared them, it was very much the women were much stronger at that than the men were. I mean, even when we trained groups of them in North Carolina, almost never did you see a male person being trained for that role because they just couldn't do it. So it's kind of interesting. But what advice can you give to women starting out in automotive, Monica?
That's a really good question. I think you just have to ask. I think if automotive is where you want to be, you just have to ask. You have to ask how you get your space at that table. Having those conversations, because I think a lot of times what happens is that because we don't see women in upper management, we believe that it's just not possible. But if you can go, let's say you start at the ground level and you start as admin or reception or wherever, where you generally see women in
Right. Accounting, business office, other areas.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, have a conversation with the dealer principal, the GM. What does it take for me to get there? What is the position that you want, and how am I going to get there? And having that conversation with that decision maker, saying, how am I going to get there? What's my career path? What do I need to do? What courses do I need to take? What other projects do I need to take on to prove that I'm worthy of that position? Because when you position it that way, you're earning it.
Well, what in the case, I mean, we have had a number of guests on over the last couple of years that happen to be female-owned dealerships, including Super Sue. Do you feel that if you were given the choice of a male-owned dealership or a female-owned dealership, you'd prefer to work for a dealer that happened to be a woman? What's your opinion there?
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't gotten a chance yet to work for a woman, DP or GM, but I think that would be amazing just to see how different the dealership runs. I mean, men and women are different, and we run things differently, and we see things differently. It would be really cool to see what a dealership like that would look like. I think it would be inspirational.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the AWA Award in Vegas last week, and the Lighthouse Award, which is the group or individual, in this case it was a group, that's influenced the automotive industry as a whole the most for the year, happened to be a group of 4 women who happened to be women of color who started a group called, I think it's called WOCAN. It was interesting because not only were they 4 women in the auto industry, but 4 black women in the industry, which is great. But in addition to that, they were shocked with the amount of other women in the auto industry who happened to be of color. And that was really interesting to me because I think in a lot of cases, and I'm not a woman, so I can't really speak to that, but realistically, it's a question of, maybe the perception of the man or woman in the business doesn't align with the reality. There may be more women out there than you realize. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. You just don't see it as often, so you assume that it's, the whole country is like that, that all dealerships are like that. But you're right, there are dealerships that are owned by and run by women. It's just not as common.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Zankin Group in Ontario. You look at, we've had a number of other, that's one that's top of mind, but there's a number of other ones. There's obviously, I think it's Myers. She's very influential in the industry, and there's a number of others, but it's not like it's 80%. So I think there's a lot of room to grow there, and I think from an OEM point of view, the OEM should be looking for that as well. I mean, we've had someone on from CDK whose job is to be representing minority dealers, but I think from an OEM point of view, they should be looking to grow that base because, over 50% of the customers happen to be women. And even if they're not buying a car for themselves, they're definitely part of that decision. So, really clearly to have a female-led organization will grow that market share, especially when you look at changing demographics. Realistically, they're part of the decision. I mean, I always used to laugh when I was talking to salespeople and training them and I'd hear this from female and male customers, where there'd be a couple at the table and the male salesperson would be focused on the man, even if it was a car for the woman in that relationship, or just they were helping them out. right? Or helping her out or whatever it might be. I thought that was very interesting that there was no focus on talking to a couple. It was talking to one person. And I'll have another example, which was quite interesting. Business manager, she had a little screen on her desk. And the purpose of the screen was to distract the husband so she could sell to the wife, which I thought was really, really interesting. And she found that no matter what she put on the screen, the man in the office would pay attention to the screen, not her, which I thought was kind of interesting. But go ahead, Jeff.
Well, it's because men are basic. Monica, you were saying something there?
I was gonna say, I totally agree with you. I mean, even personally, when my husband and I go to purchase something, they're always talking to the man. It drives me crazy to the point where I left sales deals and said, I'm not buying from you for this specific reason. I've actually done that. And in a lot of cases, this happens not just in automotive. This happens everywhere because we still assume that the man is the breadwinner and that he holds the money and he's the keeper of that money and that he's the final decision maker. What all of these studies have come out over the years, that 85% of every purchase that is made is influenced by the woman in the home. But we fail every time to take that into consideration when we are selling in any industry.
Oh, yeah. I remember, what was it, years ago, I was a nice young lady and her son was at the dealership, and they left the dealership because I guess the mother had went to the washroom, and the salesman at the other dealership had asked the son, who was probably 12, can your mother make this decision without her husband being here? And then the kid's like, yeah, absolutely. And then what happened was the salesman, even though he talked to the son, asked that question to the nice young lady. Unfortunately, her husband had died, I don't know, 90 days before that. Tragically. So it's like, what are you doing? It's very interesting. The view there was so ingrained.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it's so important for automotive to make sure that they do have that female representation on the sales floor to speak to those other women. Time and time again, when I've seen women on the sales floor, the sales manager has commented on how well they perform. Because you're right, you mentioned that about that Brooke and how it's a woman's voice. There is a sense of security when you're buying from a woman. You do feel that they're being more honest with you for whatever reason it is. There's probably tons of psychology behind exactly why that is, but we know this, we understand this, but we're not changing or being more flexible in the workplace to attract more women to take those positions. They can excel in it. They do excel in it. They're more than capable of excelling, but we just haven't fostered an environment on the sales floor for women to feel comfortable to apply for those positions.
Yeah, I use the example in Nordstrom's. I mean, my wife is a pretty demanding consumer and resistant to buy things. In a lot of cases, that's just her personality. We happened to be in Nordstrom's in Seattle, and two female sales reps at the same floor. She was looking to buy a jacket. I think it was a rain jacket or something. But it was clear that they were both very focused on selling something, but more importantly, the difference when I compared them to, male salesperson that I've had experience with buying men's clothes, they were both operating at a very high level and a much higher level even when they were competitive. One was a much higher level than the other one because she was focused on solutions. She was like, listen, you're comparing this jacket and this jacket, why don't I help you buy this? But more importantly, they didn't even have it in stock. She was that forward thinking to say, listen, I'll do the transaction here. You can go pick it up at this location. And this was even pre-COVID. So it's a testament to not only that retailer, but the fact that they had trained this person properly, but more importantly, that they were excelling with the training. So to me, I think the biggest challenge today for most car dealers is that it's about customers and about experience and about training. It's not about gender per se only, but you're fighting for the same customer today more than ever. And as a dealer or as an OEM or even as a retailer, you got to look at it and say, okay, who's the best person for that job, right? Not what's the best gender for that role. And I think historically in the car business, we've seen women in BDCs and accounting and reception and in business offices more than anything. We haven't seen them as often on the sales floor and management. And I think that's a mistake. I think you got to be representative, at least representative of the population. And, some political leaders have, I guess, looked at that. But realistically, to the video earlier, you should have a representation in your staff of the population because that's a representation of the people coming into your store. it's going to make people feel more comfortable in an industry where, unfortunately, we've done some things wrong over the last 100 years, which have solidified a negative, in some cases, perception. We need to change that, and we need to change that by thinking about things differently. Go ahead, Jeff.
So we've had this conversation, we're going on, and the industry is very much about, oh, women. Look at all the women that are succeeding in this business. We've got women dealer principals and women presidents of corporations, of OEMs, etc. However, Monica, you hit the nail on the head. You get onto the floor, you walk into a dealership, and predominantly the women you see are in reception roles. It's mostly men there. And in the F&I, it's still a high percentage of women, just because traditionally you've been more successful at that. But what is holding women back from moving into these positions? I've always felt the safest position in a dealership for somebody good is sales. Everybody's dying for good salespeople. But what's holding women back from doing that? Because I always noticed I had very few women applying for the role. Didn't matter if it was 20 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. What is that?
Let's talk about the marketing of it. How are dealerships marketing these positions specifically to get women candidates? Is that happening? I don't think so. I don't think that they keep that in mind when they're putting these job postings out. How do you make this appealing for women? Women and men obviously are very different, and what we want in a job is different. And so the perception right now, back to the study that I was referring to before with Automotive News and Deloitte, is that the perception is that women perceive that dealerships don't have a good work environment. It's unappealing. The other parts of it is that there's a lack of work-life balance. Women are, full-time is 40 hours a week, and in dealerships, the perception is that they're working 10 to 12 hours a day. And just back to the TED Talk that we watched earlier in this show, was that a lot of women are wearing two hats in their household. They're also taking care of the household after, and they don't want to be working 12 hours a week. So the perception is there that the work-life balance is not available at the automotive level.
But we're seeing that. I agree with that. I lived through it. I exited the dealership life because the dealership is your life. But we're seeing that new generations, male and female, apparently don't want that.
Yeah, I agree. And you're right. You're absolutely right. Male and female don't want that. They are looking at this newer generation is definitely looking for more a work-life balance. They want to enjoy their family. They want to enjoy their extracurricular activities, and they don't want their majority of their life to be dominated at what they are called for at the dealership or at any job, really. I think also women, when they look at automotive, they see a lack of opportunities to advance, to move up. And so, maybe I'll start as a receptionist and maybe I'll work my way up into F&I, but they don't see a clear path of how that was going to happen. So why invest my time here when I can invest my time somewhere else where I can see a clear path to advance?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about the Great Resignation, but more importantly, the fact that whether it be a millennial or Gen Z, they're saying, hey, I don't want to work 14-hour days, 7 days a week. I don't want to do that.
No.
I mean, there's so many other places where I can have a path, but more importantly, they're not expecting me to do that. And I think, it's a little challenging for those managers of, say, my generation or Jeff's generation, where basically they're saying, okay, I cut my teeth working 5 days a week, 6 days a week. I think Jeff's in the same generation. Anyway, where basically
lower generation, much younger.
So essentially, they're not used to that. I mean, you have younger daughters, Jeff. I mean, I know one of your daughters worked in auto in the BDC environment. I mean, what was her opinion of it?
Well, her opinion is, it was very funny because she ended up going into recruiting. And in the private sector, recruiting is worse than the automotive, because literally you got people that start at 7 in the morning in their jobs, and you have to interview them earlier and later and everything. However, she left the private sector, went into the public sector, and now because it's hard to hire people, she's putting in the long hours. But I actually have to ask you this, Monica. Here's something I see. even women managers of I don't know what it is, in their 30s, still I see posts celebrating their team working late to make it happen. And is this a mindset of the automotive, not just the male members of the automotive?
I think it's both. Yeah, I think it is that mindset. You see your counterparts doing that, putting in, grinding it out, right? And so you feel like if you're going to grind it out too, that you're going to get those advancements and that you're more deserving of those management positions. So you're keeping up with your counterparts. But are either right?
Sorry?
Are either right? Like male or female grinding it out? Like, I mean, that gets, I guess, into a different topic of work-life balance. But I think that's why.
I think Ian hit the nail there too, as far as the great resignation, because I am thinking that this industry is going to see a big change, because as soon as, you know, the big thing right now is the inventory shortage, the chip shortage, supply chain shortage. As soon as that starts coming back, and it will, we know it will, what's going to happen when somebody's not applying for jobs because they aren't prepared to give up their lives?
Exactly.
And, you know, it's a question of live to work or work to live.
I agree.
Maybe Elizabeth or Jacqueline had a comment here. Feel free to chime in if you'd like. You're both muted, by the way.
I had a quick statement. I think, we're talking about the workplace a lot too. And I think some of the old boys club behavior still exists at home, and women are staying out of automotive or men's jobs because they don't have the support they need at home. Working in a dealership means that you're not home on nights, you're not home at weekends. And if you have kids, who's taking care of your kids at nights and weekends? So it also comes down to having a supportive family or partner or support system at home to make it possible to be successful in the workplace.
So do you feel that the dealership should be providing support there?
No, I mean, like the reason some women are not getting into some of these roles is because they're scared of what they're going to leave at home. They don't have maybe a partner that supports that new mindset that we're seeing out there. Where they can go and be home at a dealership working on the weekend or nights, knowing that their family's taken care of, their house is running smoothly, that type of thing. So, as men, men have to lean in at home too, not just at the office to push women forward.
Hasn't that also been the case for many women that are, I'm very careful because I don't want to come across wrong, but you've got women that are either single parents or main caretaker parent, and they work in jobs other than a 9-to-5 job. Isn't that the same hurdle? Elizabeth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but you're specifically like I've worked jobs where I've had off hours, and it's, without that support at home, it makes it a little more complicated.
I think that goes back also to offering flexibility again to the TED Talk video that we saw, is offering that flexibility. And I think that's going to it's not going to be a nice to have, it's going to have to be a must have with a lot of even automotive, any kind of industry to offer their employees, is that there has to be that sense of flexibility so you can maintain that work-life balance. And that also allows women to advance in different ways that maybe they weren't allowed to before because the flexibility wasn't there.
So from an employer point of view, would you have some words of wisdom for them to not only attract female employees, but to retain them? I mean, obviously it's a different conversation, different motivation in some cases, but I think part of it is they just don't understand how to approach or how to maintain those employees. What's your thoughts there?
Elizabeth, did you want to take that, or did you?
I'm thinking. If you have something to say, you can start. I'm just thinking.
Even though you're not on camera, Elizabeth, I can see the wheels turning.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared to be camera ready today, so.
That's okay.
Well, that's the beauty of being a bald man. You're always camera ready.
You can't have that always. I think it's really understanding. Again, let's take it back to marketing, and that's what I know is if we were to go back to the target audience, and in this case it's women in automotive, what is important to them, really understanding how you can support them and what is important to them and what's feasible at the dealership level to support that. I mean, a lot of things that maybe women are looking at employers are saying, well, we can't support that, but there's got to be ways that we can change the dynamics or change the functionalities of the job to be more flexible so it attracts more women. I think it's just thinking outside the box. We've been thinking inside the box too much. This is how it has to work. You come from 9 to 5, you work like this, you put in your hours. I think that's old thinking. I think there's got to be more solutions that we haven't even looked at because there wasn't a need to. And to your point, with the Great Resignation, we have to be more accommodating to women because we are now forced to choose people in the work environment that actually want to work and actually want to find a job that they're passionate about. So we have to now accommodate all of those things. We can't just think the way we were thinking before. Thinking outside the box is going to help us find new solutions that's going to attract more women in the automotive or any other industry that's more male dominated.
I agree 100% when you look at statistics. And there was a gentleman, I think he's from Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, and he sent out an email to all his employees who are working remotely and asked them how many would come back to work versus stay at home if you force them. And over half said, listen, if you're forcing me to come back to an office, I'm just going to quit. So that tells you that you have to be more flexible. More importantly, today, you can sell cars using multiple forms of technology that may not require you to sit at a desk all day anyway. I mean, realistically, as I've seen shows over the last 3 years, more and more dealers are asking sales staff of various types to actually use their own leverage in social and elsewhere to promote what they do, but more importantly, the dealership. That's not to say they can't use technology to also sell vehicles. So I think that dealers have to really get more in lockstep with those younger employees who want to think about things differently, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, that's evolution. That's the direction we have to go if we want to resolve this issue. And it's one of those things that we have to resolve because it's the workforce right now does look a lot smaller than it did 2 years ago. So we have to start creating new ways to attract women.
Yeah, we're not creating any more baby boomers or Gen X's.
Well, you know what though, Monica, I got a takeaway from this. I think that that the hiring teams, and I don't want to say HR because heck, the HR department in automotive is is not the most popular one, and in fact, our worst attended shows, or worst viewed shows, are always the HR shows. It's like, I commented to another one that the one group I worked for, the HR department was the CFO. And then they hired an HR department because the son of the owner got involved and he wanted to get rid of a bunch of people. But one thing that my takeaway here is the hiring manager should get the marketing people involved.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Absolutely. Because, I never, ever, I always had such few women apply to the to ads or anything, and even people that recruiters have very few women that apply for traditional automotive positions. So, by the way, if you aren't doing it now and you start to do that, I want a percentage.
But it is actually looking at the problem strategically, right? What do women want? What do they want that is not allowing them to participate or to apply for these positions right now? And it goes a lot deeper than we think. We just haven't done enough studies on it to understand and start. Yeah. We just have to, just to your point, act like this is a marketing campaign.
Well, when you look at retail in general, and I'm not trying to compare traditional retail to automotive, but when you look at, say, a normal retail mall setting, I know this is a little dated, you definitely see a much more gender diverse audience than you do at a car dealership. And it was funny because on the weekend I was at a mall in Richmond near where I live, and one of the local Mazda store now has a retail location in the mall, which I hadn't seen before. And what was interesting was in that location, there were, I think, 3 salespeople, and they had a couple, it was basically a mini dealership kind of model. There were more women working in that location than probably in their store in the auto mall. And I think the reason is it was a more comfortable location for those people. They were saying, hey, like I'm already familiar with the mall. I'm familiar with the customers. It's less of a pressure environment. It's not a traditional dealership. And I thought it was really interesting just because, you know, they're hitting people with a vehicle, which traditionally Tesla has done that model before, but not traditional for an automotive dealership. I think the only other one I've seen do that lately has been Polestar. And of course, Lucid's doing that as well. But the thing that was very interesting to me was, and I did talk to a female salesperson at the location, there was a much lower pressure environment from my perception. I was there with my wife than in a traditional car dealership because it wasn't a traditional lot. It wasn't, you know, it was. So part of it, I think, is that perception of pressure from the customers that came in. I know when I started in the car business over 20 years ago, I used to get some very weird reactions from people when I first started, which shocked me because there was a lot of pent up anger from some customers. And I was like, I'm just sitting here, like, I'm not doing anything. Like, I'm trying to show you vehicles. But there was a lot of anger from some customers, and that kind of surprised me. So maybe that's part of it too. But when you look at recruiting, and I see recruiting ads all the time on LinkedIn from different dealers all over North America and even globally, I would say that the vast majority of ads I see are posted by either the marketing department, be it Centez or other groups, or possibly by a manager, but there isn't really a consistent, like, we're looking for people, but it isn't sort of marketed as we're looking for the best people of various types. Here's some of our employees. It's more like, here's a job ad. And I think there's a definite opportunity to say, listen, not only are we looking for people, here's some of our employees. Like, here's a picture of the diversity of our group versus, you know, the posts that you see around International Day of the Woman. It's like, here's our 10 female employees that we're focusing on once a year. Like, what happens the rest of the year, right?
That's when all the women employees got showcased.
Yeah, once a year.
Once a year.
But even the marketing people that are posting those, Ian, you made a point that they're not focusing on posting an ad, a marketing ad for people. They're posting a job ad, and because the company says marketing's got to post ads.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at it and say, okay, I'm looking for employees. I happen to be a car dealership. There's other car dealerships looking for employees, and there's other employers. LinkedIn is probably one of the biggest sources for hiring out there in terms of social media. You should have a consistent effort as to not only we're looking for people, but here's the diversity of our group. Here's our corporate culture. I mean, there's lots of ads about toxicity in environments and bad work environments and what to do in a resume and whatever. But you don't see a lot like, okay, here's why you should work here, and here's why we're different than everyone else, and here's how we're all in. Like, here's why we're this way. Like, let's do some stories about sort of what we're looking for, but more importantly, why we're changing things. I think car dealers have a huge opportunity to attract talent, but they have to fight for it with everybody else, right? So they really have to focus on, okay, I want technicians. We've heard that on the show before. I want great female talent. I want great talent in general. I need employees. I can't find them. Well, part of it is the story you're telling about how you hire people and how you support your people. To your point, Monica, earlier, wouldn't it be great if they said, hey, you know, we're supportive of young mothers. We're supportive of single parents. This is what we're willing to do for them.
Yeah, but the question is, are they?
Yeah.
Do they live their thing after the fact?
But you got to start by having a plan and executing, right? And I think a lot of it is just, oh, we need staff. Let's panic and put posts up. Hope they apply.
Monica, your thoughts?
Need a strategy to attract women, and it's something that you have to live by, and your philosophy at the dealership level, the ground level, has to change for all of this to actually play out and to continue. Because it's a great thing. Oh, we need employees. You know what? It'd be great to have a woman on the sales floor. I've seen it at our, you know, at the other dealership across the street, and I heard she does great. We need another woman. Your intentions aren't right there, because you're looking at, you're not trying to create a culture of women and men working together in the auto dealership. You're trying to see a benefit of, hey, I heard that she does really well and she brings in a lot of sales. So the intention isn't one to grow women in the dealership. It is, hey, I want to make more money, and I heard women can do it for me.
Yeah, I love it. That's so bang on. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's the intention is not there. Someone coming in and being like, listen, this is a problem in automotive. There are not enough women representing upper management. This is how we're going to conquer it and continue to conquer it for the next 10 to 15 years. Because according to this study, we're going backwards.
Well, yeah.
We're going backwards.
I mean, I had a friend who worked at a BMW store locally. She now works at Tiffany's. Why? It's a better work environment. had nothing to do with the car business. She just like, given the choice, this is a better work environment. She could sell cars fine, but why? Which is a better opportunity. So yeah, to your point, it can't be piecemeal support. It can't be like, not genuine. You actually have to be all in. I mean, we heard numbers, I think, Jeff, 90% attrition for female employees in cars, which was higher than the men in turnover. I was like, wow, that's a crazy number.
Isn't something weird? You mentioned earlier, and Monica, tell me your opinion. Why is it that Lucid and Tesla, who are modeling themselves as like an Apple store for automotive, located in malls or near malls or something, why do they have such a poor level of female sales employees?
I think it's still the mentality. I think it's one of those things that you say, we want more women, but then there's no action taken to support that statement. I
But
think
they don't even hire automotive people. I know people, super duper people. I know women in automotive that have applied to those companies, not just necessarily those two, but Polestar, etc. And they aren't even getting interviews.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one thing to say one thing. We want one more women. We want a more diversified staff, but then there has to be a plan. There has to be a philosophy. There has to be so much more. It's not just about making a statement. We need more women. It's like, what is your plan to do that? What is your plan to continue to do that after you've hired your first 10 women, right? Like it almost becomes one of those things that's in fashion. Okay, cool. We're diverse. We give women equal opportunities here, but do you? Maybe for one position you did. How do you continue to create that philosophy in people's minds moving forward? It's not just a phase. It's not just a fad. It's not just something that's cool to do and makes you seem woke. I think that's the problem, is that the intention isn't strong enough to continue to create a long-term strategy. That's what I think the problem is, really.
You mentioned something there, and we're running out of time, but woke implies to me, and not being an old fart,
No,
woke implies to me that you can go back to sleep. It's
well, you're right, and that's what's happening.
yeah, it's okay, we're woke, we did it, now we go,
And now I'm over it.
yep, we gotta move on to the next stage.
Exactly, and that the next thing that people are talking about, and that's no longer, maybe that's no longer women in automotive or in industries that are male dominated. Let's see what else is happening. We got to be. It's like how fashion changes. This seems like for a lot of industries, it's just where the conversation lies. Now the conversation came back to more females in management positions. We got to get on this. Let's do this now. And then that conversation isn't there anymore, and we've forgotten about it. That's the real problem.
Yeah, no staying power, right? No ability to really build a long-term strategy. It's like we're thinking in very small segments, and we're making changes. And to use Tesla as an example, I mean, they've had more than a few lawsuits over all kinds of issues with employees, but a lot of it seems to come back to the same theme, which is that the managers aren't managing the interactions between employees properly. And it may be gender, it may be race and gender, it could be a lot of different things, but more importantly, it sounds like there's a challenge from upper management down. But it looks like we're out of time, so any final thoughts?
I think this is a great topic, and I think it's, the more we talk about it, the more we remind people that it's something that's consistently needs to be taken care of. It's not like now it's International Women's Day. Let's talk about how women are in management positions and how women are underrepresented in certain industries. It's something that's been ongoing for hundreds of years. Let's continue to find a solution instead of just talking about it once a year in March.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it's kind of like all the focus on, I guess, Black History Month. It's like 1 month a year. Let's talk about it for a month, right?
Yeah, and let's forget about it and not make changes and not continue through with those strategies. So I think that's where the problem lies, and I think that's where we have to really go back and say, if this is a problem we want to create a solution for, it's a long-term solution that's going to take time to actually stay with us. That's actually going to take time to resolve. Yeah. I mean, it's actually crazy that we're in 2022 and we're still talking about women being underrepresented in certain industries. It's crazy that this is still a conversation, to be honest.
It's actually a shame that we're in 2022 and it's a big deal to say women in automotive. And I mean, as I say, I will only cop to 25 years in this business, but it's been a lot more. And this has been going on since I was there in the good old boy days. Well, not that far back, but I was there at the tail end of people having bottles in their drawers and stuff like that. And I was at groups with one of the first dealer principals that were female, and it was like, oh, this is going to change everything. It's still the same.
Yeah, I mean, remember when we did the first Women in Automotive show now almost 3 years ago, and people were like, oh, you shouldn't do that topic. It's a bad topic. I was like, what do you mean it's a bad topic? What are you talking about?
Why was it considered a bad topic? I'm so curious.
I don't know. I have multiple people tell me that. Like, we're doing it anyway, but I'm just curious as to why. And then as we started to do more shows, but more importantly, to Jeff's point, human resources shows, and we started to hear some metrics from some of our guests in human resources, Sandy and others, we were just like shocked with the amount of attrition for women who are brave enough to apply that just couldn't survive because it was such a negative environment for them. So to us, that just made us even more want to sell the human resources show, but more importantly, to talk about the topic that really nobody wanted to talk about, which is we have a problem, we need to find solutions, but more importantly, we need to have discussions. I don't know everything there is to know about this topic. I have no idea, but I'm always open to learning. And I think part of the challenge is some dealers just aren't. They're like, yeah, we just want it to go back to where it was in 1975. Like,
it's easier that way because you're comfortable with what you know, right? And that's what you've seen, and that's what you're comfortable, and that's how you're comfortable growing your teams. And so you continue doing that, and it continues to go for generation and generations. And the other interesting point, I'll wrap it up here, is that a lot of dealerships are generationally owned. So it's the father now gives it to his son, and the son gives it to his son. And guess what? Those same philosophies are being passed down over and over and over again. Nothing's changing.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, when you look at the generational, with the exception of real estate moguls, Jeff and I've had many conversations about this. We were talking about PhD, Papa Has Dealership, and the fact that, there's not a lot of new in the car business. I mean, I was at NADA, and one of the biggest boosts of the show was Techion, which is changing an industry. Part of the car business has been the same probably for 100 years. Even in that case, I think the pace of change is going to be slow. And the reality is there's just very few companies making big changes. And I think that's unfortunate because the industry needs it. And I think if you had a lot more female trailblazers in the industry leading dealerships, or even males who want to do that, who want to lead that way or want to bring in that talent, I think it's a missed opportunity. I mean, I don't think it's about gender alone. It's about you want the best talent and you want that talent to be representative and maybe even more than representative. I mean, I look at Justin Trudeau with 50% cabinet being women. Why 50%? Why not just pick the best people? If it happens to be 80% women, that's fine.
Totally. Yeah. And why do you have to have that caveat there? Right? Like, why are we counting that? Yeah. One step, one thing we haven't chatted about is taking it one step back. Women in automotive have to start with education in automotive. What is the educational system doing to fill in those positions? How are they attracting females to come into those programs?
Well, it was interesting that not to go back to the video at the beginning of the show, but one of the studies that they did was they brought new parents into a maternity ward, and they were asked to pick up children of various genders, and then they monitored how they talked to these new infants. And what was interesting was how they talked to female infants versus male infants, like how they spoke to them, how they held the kids. And I think it all starts there. It's part of it is our perception of how we raise children from a very young age. And that has to change as well. It was a very interesting study because it was very counterintuitive, but a lot of it is ingrained in culture and in learning and in education. And you can see that with, the amount of women enrolled in engineering, for example, or even in the program I did. I mean, I think it was the first year in the history of the MBA program I was in that there was more women than men in the program. And that program has been around for over 10 years in that form. But, realistically, that's part of it too, is what are we teaching young men and women how to interact and how to, what's possible, what isn't possible. So a lot of it, I think, goes back to that.
It's so right. Like, what do we buy a toddler who's, a male toddler? Yeah. Here's a car, here's a truck, here's construction trucks. What do we buy a girl? We buy her Barbies. So even going down right back to the basics, what are we teaching our children?
And we had a comment. My wife agrees with you. We must be flexible on schedule and remote. Thanks for that comment, Steve from LinkedIn. Have yourself a great week. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. And of course, as always, if you need the link to the preview video that I can't premiere on LinkedIn or Facebook, just send an email to ianandjeff@autohubshow.com. And a special thanks to Monica, Trooper, and Jacqueline. And of course, we also had Elizabeth on the show. Any final thoughts, Jacqueline, as we close?
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of takeaways, and a lot of it comes down to the marketing. And something I thought about as well is if we're truly wanting the best of the best, and you're leading with automotive experience or sales experience, it's not what you're going to get. We need to look at skills, and you're not going to find a better project manager, problem solver, crisis management, time management than a mother.
You're right, absolutely.
And also a better manager, because all salespeople are little kids.
Exactly. But I think it comes down to as well as marketing to women. It's not going to hurt anyone. I think it's marketing to human beings, and especially with Gen Z coming up, it's a lot of what they want as well. And it's just that flexibility and looking at skills rather than past experience. And yeah, it's kind of what everyone's looking for.
Appreciate that. Any final thoughts, Jeff?
I'm good. Thank you so much, Monica, for the input. I learned a heck of a lot. Thanks for joining us, Jacqueline. And I enjoyed it immensely. It was a tremendous input and just deep knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's like Pandora's box. You can go deeper and deeper and deeper. There's
oh gosh,
much more to it, right?
Really deep. I think we need to have a show. We need to have a show. Why do men in auto suck so much, eh?
Good. Absolutely. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.